No, here?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Oh, yeah, we're in here. Okay,
There's
there's
any
the
questions on top. I'm sure so many of those.
Today's Friday. Well, welcome. Since we're live streaming now, I'm just going to do a brief introduction on the process here. So when Betsy, after offered a resignation from the board, we opened a 60-day application window and we were lucky to receive 4 very qualified applicants, very thorough materials. And the board opted to have a brief interview process as a way of welcoming the energy and the effort that went into applying and just encouraging community members who want to engage with the school to join us on a variety of platforms. We have district accountability committee, local school accountability committees. And so while we only have 1 seat to offer today, it's just so encouraging and so welcome to have 4 fully qualified applicants to have to choose from, as difficult as that may be. So as we move through this process, we're going to keep the interview short, about 15 minutes each. Your resumes and cover letters are public record for anyone listening who wants to kind of dive into the profiles of who we're here with today. And I just again wanted to welcome you all so much and say thank you for joining us in this process. So first off, we have Jonathan Delk. And if you wanted to begin with a brief personal statement or a summary of your interest, and then we'll go down the road this time in this order and then back up, and then we'll mix it up from there for questions.
Thanks so much, Lindsay.
Take it away.
Yeah, I'm John. You can call me John instead of Jonathan. That might be easier since there is a Jonathan in the room.
Understood.
I have been a member of the community here in Carbondale for several years now. I think going on 5, 6, 8, even 7. I'm trying to count back as quickly as I can. I have a 6-year-old daughter in kindergarten at CRES, and been a bit deeply steeped in the community, the Roaring Fork Valley for as long as I've been in the Roaring Fork Valley. I first moved here as a true ski bum seasonal worker, doing endless winters between Aspen and Queenstown, New Zealand. And when we decided to settle in and root down in the Roaring Fork Valley, I got involved in cycling. And that was my first foray in getting involved with the schools as I helped start Roaring Fork Cycling, which we brought free after school programming to local kids. And I had I'll try not to cry, but I had some peak experiences of bringing less than likely kids onto the trails and experiencing what it means to connect not just with their peers and with the community, but also the environment that surrounds them. And truly one of the most inspiring experiences was crafting this program. And it dawned on me, well, geez, I have all this professional experience, business experience, and experience working with youth. Maybe this is a way I could get back to the community and help bring the community along into being the best version of itself. So that's me. There's a lot more to me, but I'm open to questions as well. You've all read my resume.
You want to start, Jamie? Oh, sure.
Since I get to start, maybe I'll set the tone. This board has been through a lot. It's been through a lot, COVID and lots of changes. And it's just really important to me that we support this board who has been through a lot, right? So I don't know if that's going to make sense, but how should the board go about finding out and knowing what the parents and taxpayers and other stakeholders in the district are thinking?
This is a really difficult issue to address because the formal ways of going about gathering information can be inherent and implicit with bias. Even just the way you craft a survey and ask a question can elicit a response and can be guiding that response. So there has to be great care that goes into the way we ask questions and the way we recruit information. But then there are even situations in formal engagement that create great fear. One of the things that was brought to my attention or my knowledge early on in engaging less than likely students to join a cycling organization was they're not necessarily going to fill out a survey as part of the Latinx community or Latino community. They may not want to sign up with information or share critical information. There's fear in the world about divulging information. And so when you have these barriers to traditional ways of recruiting information, you have to come up with non-traditional ways. And that may be anecdotal conversations that you have, going out of your way, creating focus groups. The big thing I would take away is there's so many different ways of doing this. The most important thing is that significant effort goes into it and it never stops. Creating opportunities and recruiting information in ways that meet the people where they want to be met rather than expecting them to meet us is the most important component to engaging in the community. The last thing I'll say on this is there are loud voices. And loud voices often get an outsized weight and consideration. And so finding a way to validate loudest voices and hear them and understand them without overweighting them in the consideration process is the way the board manages itself and best represents the community.
Kind of tied into that. I'm interested in the question, how much should boards seek out the views of teachers and other school employees, being a different stakeholder group than sort of the outward facing parent groups?
A lot. Like a whole lot. Teachers and staff are the closest to the actual work that's getting done, which is educating our youth with it. And so we need to take the time to hear the teachers and staff. We need to engage with them in meaningful ways and ask the best questions possible that elicit the most honest and real responses, but also without fear of retribution or concern. We need to understand culture within not just the school itself and the student body, but within the employment relationship between the teachers and the administration. There's so many levels of this that needs to be paid attention to. But again, it all comes down to balance. We don't want to be disproportionate. We don't want to overhear one voice over another. We need to make sure that we're taking into consideration all the impacts. And harking back to the prior questions you did when you asked yours, it's easy to address effects, but when we hear different groups, we might tease out the connections between these effects and get to root causes. And that's our greatest opportunity, is to listen carefully and think critically so that we can not just solve small problems, but look for opportunities to solve larger problems or take advantage of larger opportunities so that we can solve lots of problems simultaneously and hopefully not create one.
Thanks. What do you believe are the most important indicators of student achievement and growth for a school board to monitor? And how frequently should the board review this data? And what actions should the board take if student outcomes are not improving?
This is a great question. Because there's this very boring, mundane answer to this, which is, frankly, Jasmine, this is already outlined in the Colorado Department of Education. They dictated exactly what we meant to care about, and we should go for that. And boy, is that not necessarily how I feel, while I think it's important. And there are very important components to measuring success off of standardized testing. That's why we do it. There's other things. I'd like to think that the best indicator of our success is how excited the kids are to go to school every morning. Are they jumping out of the car? Are they smiling? Are they giving high fives? Are they excited? Or are they, sleepy, tired, dragging their backpack or kicking and screaming as they get out of the car? And it's not to say every day at school needs to be a party, but it's, are they bringing in an enthusiasm that is going to be created with equal enthusiasm for the work that needs to get done every day? And there are other indicators as well, right? You have to look at graduation rates, you have to look at dropout rates, attendance, early literacy, and different areas of English, math, science, and all the different things that we measure. Yes, but really enthusiasm from the students and enthusiasm from the people surrounding the students, the staff, the teachers. I think that's going to be our best measurement, because if we have enthusiasm, I think all the other things come much easier.
I'm going to take us back up to question 2. So can you describe the board's role as it relates to the superintendent's role in the district?
man, governance is hard. And I've worked with boards, and I've been on boards, and I've been an executive director, and I'm currently a chief executive officer with 8 bosses. So that's you're a central point of everything. And man, is it hard, right? Because you feel like you're balancing, you're spinning all the plates on the spindles, and you're managing it, and then something else comes in, you got to juggle it up. I think respect for the superintendent's role is paramount to the success of the board governance. If the board dives too deep and reaches too deep into the operations and the execution of what the district is meant to be doing, then we're going to get in the way and muddle the leadership of the superintendent. Simultaneously, we have to have enough awareness, and that's probably the trickiest part, right? How do you know enough, but not overly influence? And that right there is about asking questions, being present, being aware, paying attention, and creating groups that surround the questions so that you can guide and advise rather than overstep on the execution. And I'm not accusing anybody of doing this. It's just a real easy thing to do in every board situation, which is somebody from outside of the superintendent or the executive director or wherever executive role it is, comes from the outside, brings up a concern or a question. And what do people do when they're presented with a problem? Try to solve it. And everybody means to do the best thing they can. And the thing that in a governance situation where we can do the best we can is to loop in the superintendent and make sure they're part of the process.
So we're right about at 10 minutes, but we really want to hear questions from candidates. So I'm wondering if you have observations or questions that you would like to ask us as a board. Board members will each get about a minute to respond individually, recognizing that in this particular case, we're not speaking for the whole as long as we align with our norms and all that good stuff. So what do you have on your mind for us?
Alright, I'm gonna try to quickly. We have 5 minutes, you guys only get a minute, so I probably won't ask one question, but I'm gonna try to ask 2. So my first question is, where do you think the greatest opportunity for growth in the governance of the board exists? So how the board operates, how it interacts with the district. What is the biggest opportunity?
Can someone else start? I'm the newest, by the way.
Sure, well, I think I can start with that, I'll try and keep it short, but. My goal is to build on some of the structures that have been brought from my predecessors who've been in the trenches trying to create a replicable system of accountability, transparency on data and maintaining that and keeping us at that level and using those as levers. And then obviously another area for growth for us right now is building kind of norms and understanding of each other as board members. We've gone through a lot of changes on the board, leadership changes, new seats, Betsy's resignation. And so finding a way to sort of renorm our way of communicating with each other, I think is probably a growth area right now.
I think continuing to build out systems that are replicable, that would stand the test of time, that would stand the test of multiple different people sitting in these seats and different personalities. And really entrenching those systems into the culture of the district is the work that needs to be done. We spent significant energy building those systems over the last 4.5 to 5 years, and now it's, are they gonna stand up or are they gonna topple, right? And so I think that is up to the board, however it is situated in the coming years, to decide, do they wanna knock them down and start over, build them up, what's working, what isn't, and so it's like a process of assessment and either bolstering or dismantling in place and building something new.
And I would just say. As a board member who's been on here the longest, I think sometimes the board lacks political courage because we've gone through so many things and I think that sometimes it gets really hard to be in the seat. And so, this is the pre-pandemic serving on the board does not exist anymore. And so, I think sometimes that gets really hard in a small rural town for us to try to operate as moms, as parents, as members of the community, and also trying to do this role. I think sometimes that is a difficult thing for all of us, to try to manage.
Yeah, so I would say that thinking about it and but From my perspective, I can't speak for the board, you know, really feel like we have huge opportunities to really connect in the right way with the staff, with the teachers who are in the classrooms, with the parents who have the kids that are in the classrooms. Yeah, all of our stakeholders. I think we have a huge opportunity to, yeah, connect stronger and better with them with district communication as well as just with you know, our relationships, because I was saying they've been through a lot, and after a while, you feel like you just want to go hide and, you know, not have to face everything, yeah, and they've done a great job, but yeah, that's something that I hope the district, you know, we did go through some tough times, and I think it's time to try to come out and, you know, really engage with the stakeholders as much as we can, because I will see it then as, then we can really all be working on it together. And again, you know, you just said, make sure you know enough. There's still so much about what we do that I don't know. And so I still feel a lot, oh, maybe we are already doing this, but I think we could do better with our communication with all of our stakeholders.
Well, I
So
want to
just with time,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm
Oh,
gonna
sorry.
offer you a last minute of anything else you want to share with us about yourself. Where's
say the same thing. I want to be fair to the time.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
gotta track
Uh,
going.
Yeah, great question too. But I will say this, it is amazing to be surrounded by such important pillars of the community that are doing such great work that can sometimes feel like it's wrought with adversity and strife and frustration. And it's also really rewarding to be surrounded by other excellent candidates. Which I'll be honest, I did some research, guys. You guys are great. But thank you so much for taking the time and considering all of us, and I wish you the best of luck on your consideration, deliberation, choice.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
All right, well, we're gonna keep moving, and we have Nikolai up
Right.
next, he's already here in the hot seats.
Yeah,
Thank you again for joining us.
good evening. My name's Nikolai Tremansky. Yeah, I would like to echo what John said. I also, when I saw that it was public record, I went ahead and I looked at my email and I looked up the thing of all your blurbs and your sort of statuses, and I was really impressed. And pretty intimidating. So I came about being here in this room tonight because I think primarily because I'm a parent of two Roaring Fork School District kids. My son is 12, he's in 6th grade, and my daughter is 9, she's in 3rd grade at CMS and CRES respectively. When Betsy decided to step down, I knew there would be an opening. When Tammy got elected, I was interested in that opening, but I wasn't in the right neighborhood. One of the reasons that I'm interested is a feeling and a desire to be more involved locally with what's going on in our community. By trade, I'm a child psychiatrist, and what that means is that I spent a lot of time studying how individuals, specifically children, interact with other people. I did my residency and fellowship at the University of New Mexico at Albuquerque, which is why I live. When I started looking into what a school board member does, I did feel pretty intimidated, surprised to find out how little qualifications I actually have for that. I haven't served on a board. I haven't really had any formal positions of leadership in government or anything like that. What I do have is an extremely strong stake in my children's welfare and the welfare of their peers. I was born and raised in Colorado. I grew up above the Front Range, and then I went to high school in Denver. And where I went to high school was an inner city high school. It's called Manual High School. It's vaguely still alive. And in its iteration, when I went to high school, it was a 90% Black school. So I was the minority in school. And what I learned there is that you would have these white classes with AP students. That's the advanced placement tests. And they were all white. Whereas 90% of the school was Black. Manual had a 2,000 person enrollment. But 1,000 people attended every day. And of those 1,000 who didn't attend, they were primarily African American. My education, then when I went to medical school in Israel and got to see some really strong striations and culture there as well. I was recently on a camping trip with my kids on third grade camping trip. So I went out to Rock Bottom and then I'll let you guys ask questions, but this is the thing I've been thinking about in terms of this, is that a rising tide lifts all boats. There's a lot of questions that I read. There's like 10 questions, and some of them are like 3 questions and 1 question. So technically it was like 17. But when I was looking at the questions and I was looking at the data about education, what I looked at was that you have you have minority representations, and if you point and click to the minority, you get a certain dropout rate. This goes to the question about how we can measure these things. Minorities do have a much higher dropout rate. English as a second language had the highest dropout rate. The kids who seem to be scoring lowest on all the tests were kids who didn't have language skills that were commensurate with their peers. And so if we want to raise the tide, I think we have to find a way to somehow get those kids involved more. And I think that means getting their families and guardians involved more. So those are the thoughts that I have coming into this meeting. I'm happy to answer questions to the best of my ability. And like I said, just sitting in the room with these three guys, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm happy to be here. I feel great to serve.
Thanks. Kathy, yours for this time.
Sure. As you were speaking, led me to this question. So what specific policies, measurable goals, budget priorities, or instructional strategies would you advocate for as a board member to accelerate academic growth and improve outcomes for Latino students?
Absolutely. Like in medicine, we have something called morbidity and mortality. So morbidity and mortality is when someone gets hurt, that's a morbidity. When someone dies, that's mortality. When something severe enough happens, we look at it like case by case. We say, what happened? If it's a hospital unit, they take it apart and they say, what happened in this instance? I don't know if this already exists or not, but to look at dropout rates and to say, where did this kid get lost? If that kid had a sibling who was also lost, to find out where those gaps are, I think would be relevant. And it wouldn't have to be for every single child in the Roaring Fork School District. It could be the ones who actually got lost to education. Which again, that rate is the highest rate was the language difference. The multilingual is what it says in the survey versus minority. Minority was the second highest. But that would be one way to look at it. I think also, I think John alluded to it well, but somehow define, he used the word focus group. I don't really know the terminology for this, but I think that already using CMAS, using the parent surveys that are going on, there's already strong efforts to do it in a standardized way. I'll save it until I get to ask you guys a question, because I do have a question, but it has to do with the idea of how can we randomly observe different classrooms and see who and who isn't engaged, and then classify which those students are. And if that's a student who's multilingually challenged, then how do we bridge that gap? Do we partner them with other students? Do we partner them with teachers who are multilingual? How do we do that most effectively? That's the thoughts that I don't have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, are we changing our questions?
You can choose from a list.
Okay. Well, good. What do you believe are the most important indicators of student achievement and growth for a school board to monitor? And as a follow-up, how frequently should the board review this data, and what actions should the board take if student outcomes are not improving?
I think dropout rates should be reviewed on each dropout. Like each time a child loses education, we should be wondering, how did they lose it? Where did we fail? So that would be a case by case. That would be a frequency based on dropout. As far as like the rising tide, I don't know that I'd have a huge amount to have. That would come into like management. As far as governance of it, it's reading the data that comes in and seeing if they're continuing to go up. I was really encouraged to see what's happened in the last 4 years. There's been significant changes. It went from like orange to green. Now things like seem to be mostly accredited, which is great. And I think that the goal should be above accreditation, right? It should be shining education. But yeah, to answer the question, I think that you start with the most severe, and the most severe is a kid who says, I'm not going there anymore. I refuse to return to that school. And we have to figure out why and how we can change that. And if they're willing to come back. And if they're not willing to come back, who's the next one who can not lose?
Thank you.
So I'm gonna go with the board's role. Describe the board's role as it relates to the superintendent's role in the district. You just mentioned it, but could you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, in my research for this interview, I had to look up all the trees, and what it looks like to me, if I'm understanding correctly, is that the board gathers the opinions of the community at large. For the most part, students, and then their parents, and then taxpayers who are supporting the students and their parents. And then we report that to the superintendent. And we look at what the superintendent is doing. And if the superintendent is doing what seems commensurate with that 5-year plan and with what the community at large is doing, then great, we do everything we can to support the superintendent. If the superintendent is doing something that seems contrary to that, then I think it becomes the board's job to make the choice of saying, hey, we don't think you're listening to what the community at large is saying. And from there on, I don't know what kind of things go, but that would be my answer to the question. I don't think it's my job to really go beyond translating from the community to the superintendent and making sure there's clearly translated. And if it's not, then to govern accordingly.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll go with 6. What is the most important job of the superintendent?
Ooh. Yeah,
Most
I looked at the
important.
decision tree, that is a huge decision tree.
Depends on the day.
I think that if I was in that position, my most important job would be to create a harmonious environment for staff and all staff, you know, from custodial staff to teachers to secretaries to sort of all the people who are front facing in the educational system, to be able to be heard, to be listened to. You'd have to be an incredible listener. And then to guide the ship, to have some way of saying, this is the goals that we're setting out, this is what we're doing. I think it's, to answer your question, it's not a very answerable question. There's too many different jobs you to do. But I think if I was to think about how could I harmoniously create an environment for these people to feel good about what they're doing, that they're doing it for the right reasons. And if I put that in my forefront each morning when I went to work, I think that would help me if I was in that position.
Thanks. So that was some very spelt answers, very tight answers. We have a little bit of time if you have questions for us. Happy to answer.
Yeah, I was curious about because I was thinking about like how you would observe, how you could figure it out, how you could randomize yourself as an observer to be in a classroom or in a setting and outside of standardized testing, which I know about as a dad. And I guess, you know, in the world of psychiatry, I've been exposed to some of this about developmental schemas and how things work. How do you actively currently evaluate and spot check how your work is doing in different classrooms throughout the 15 schools in the district?
I don't know.
We don't do that work, right? We're not in classrooms doing that work. We have a superintendent that manages that work by that whole scheme of this is who controls what. We have people that oversee high schools, middle schools. I oversee the leadership in those schools, who are the people who are actually in classrooms for the most part. What we do is review the data that's drawn from those observations and from that work.
But we
Right.
do have a good way for you to ask the district how they do it,
Yes.
and you will get the right answer from the right person, which is what I love
Mhm.
about the systems they put in.
You know, our job as a board is really to make sure that that data is coming back to us and that we're reviewing it for the public, our stakeholders to have access to. Because we cannot be the collectors and the holders of all of this information. So it's important for us to make sure that there are systems in place that make sure that that information gets shared with the general population, stakeholders, with parents who care about it, so that we can actually prove that we're doing something. But yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, just echoing that. I wish we could all spend more time in the classroom, and I think for me, that was the hardest transition into this role, coming from a teaching perspective. And recognizing that you don't carry the same hat into this room that you used to wear when you become a board member. So whether it was an engaged parent or whether it was as a teacher, and it can be really hard to take that off because it represents a lens that you've taught yourself to view the world through and that you value and that you've built over all of these years and is often very closely connected to your identity. So moving into the role on the board from being a teacher was difficult because I don't get to spot check classrooms and I don't get to spend as much time with students as I would like. And so we're constantly zooming out and stepping back and creating, again, just echoing the systems, the accountability, the transparency. Our data dashboard is fantastic. I go back all the time to check it out. And then we also do get to do school tours, which is fantastic. We do get to go to the rooms, and that was, again, a system that was set up a few years ago to make sure that boards did stay connected in the buildings. And that is really important because there's something you learn about being in the building and walking through. And we get to watch teachers teaching, but we usually go along with the superintendent or the school's kind of support person, their coach, and kind of see through their lens and engage in that way. So I don't know if that's particularly helpful, but it is a hard transition, I'll tell
And
you.
I did substitute, and I can still substitute. Mostly, usually you can't, but in a rural district you can. And so, I mean, I think, you know, that is something that it's really important to me that I do still get to see it and stay connected. The tricky part is you don't go tell the principal what to do. You can see it, you can have questions, and then you gotta go through the. That's, you know, like, who do I tell? How do I do it?
No one.
No one,
Nothing.
Nothing.
yeah.
You have about
Answers.
2.5 minutes if you had another question, or if you just wanted to offer your final thoughts.
Many questions to sort of narrow it down, but I do appreciate what you're saying. I think I do understand what you're saying about the, you're gathering the data and you're looking at it from above. I think that one of the strengths of having like a smaller community, and not an urban center is that there is an opportunity. You know, Jasmine, you were alluding to the idea that being in a smaller town and looking for political courage and knowing that you're gonna see people on the street. Part of what my job is holding confidentiality for people. And that's something that I think is an interesting part of this board is the idea that you're gonna be governing and deciding things that have to do with children's education in the valley and how money is spent, you know, how my neighbors' taxes are spent. Whether I agree with or don't agree with them ideologically or politically. And how important the central focus goal remains, which is to give our kids the best education possible. That would be, I think, that remains my reason for being in this room, is that if I can do something to assure that my kids' education is best protected and supported, and that means that their friends and even their frenemies, and potentially their enemies' educations are also supported. I think for all the children that run for it, it's a chance. So, yeah. Thanks for giving me a chance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think you're up next, Richard.
I think so.
Welcome to the hot seat.
It's not to be in the hot seat. My name is Richard Neely. You check my references, sometimes I go by Rye, so people will refer to me as that. So, super excited to be here. Really excited to be here with all these folks. It's a great group of people and it certainly gives me a lot of hope for our community and a real sense of folks' willingness to serve. And I think that's where I come from. I understand your jobs have been extremely challenging at times, but your commitment to public service on a staff level and a board level, I think it's really cool. I grew up in the valley here, got 3 kids spread across the district at various schools, so I primarily approach this from a parental perspective, but I look forward to learning more about some of the successes and challenges that the district is achieving right now on the success side and some of the challenges that you have coming up. You know, looking at your budget projections for next year, you're looking at a $3.5 to $5.5 million budget deficit. That's a real challenge that you gotta figure out. Hopefully I can help with that. You know, yeah, at some point you're gonna be renegotiating your contract with your superintendent, which is a critical role of the board. But you've made some progress as well. I shouldn't say you, the district has made some progress. I mean, student achievement has gone up, although there's still challenges there. You have a lot of the students in the schools not meeting some of our key metrics for reading, mathematics, things like that. So there's ongoing challenges that need to be addressed, but I'd be more than happy to work with you all to do that. Seems like a great group. I don't think you'll go wrong picking one of these 4 folks here. I'm happy to answer some questions or tell you more about myself. And we can do a little bit of that all at the same time if you want.
Does anyone take us off this time?
Sure. All right, what do you believe are the most important indicators of student achievement and growth for a school board to monitor? And how frequently should the board review this data? What actions should the board take if student outcomes are not improving?
Sure. I think you need to constantly be monitoring student achievement, whether that's measured through standardized testing, happiness, enthusiasm. I thought Mr. Dump's point was great, but we do need to make sure that we're achieving some of those goals that are set out in the 5-year plan. If we have students continually underperforming on standardized testing or not reaching grade level capabilities, then we need to do something to change that. I think ultimately the board can best effectuate that outcome through the implementation of policies and through the selection of the qualified leader at the school, which would be the superintendent. But that work needs to be continuing year over year as the school year progresses. And I see it as a main function of the school board is to make sure that if there is an issue with student achievement, it's addressed and then reversed if possible.
Thank you. I'd love if you could describe the role of the board as compared to the superintendent, as it relates to the superintendent's role in the district.
Sure.
Thanks.
I agree with some of what other candidates have said. I mean, the board is tasked with creating and implementing policy through the superintendent. The role of the board is not to direct staff, not to, chastise principal about what he or she or they may be doing right or wrong. You do that through your superintendent. I've been on both sides of this equation. I've been an executive level individual, I've been on a board, and it is a balancing act. But ultimately, the board is the face of the district along with the superintendent, so that partnership needs to be really key. And ultimately, the board has to understand though that directing staff, managing staff, that's the job of the superintendent. And if the superintendent isn't meeting those expectations, then that's where the board has its opportunity to effectuate it.
Yep. And I go back to my first one, how should the board go about finding out and knowing what the parents and taxpayers and our district are thinking?
Sure, I think. I was thinking about that on the second before. I mean, that's mostly building on and creating personal relationships, I think. I mean, whether that's with your neighbors, other parents, with the teachers. Having conversations, communicating with those folks, I think is the key way to do that. You have some opportunities coming up to increase revenue for the school, and that is going to be crucial to have each board member's little community or large community of folks that are around that board member to explain why something like a mill levy increase is crucial to school success across the district. And yes, utilizing technology to communicate is great, but you also need to have board members willing to go out, have that political courage I heard a little bit about, and sell why it's necessary. You're faced with a prospect when you have a deficit of either increasing revenue or cutting costs. And the increases to teacher pay that have been proposed are rather modest. The increase in healthcare cost is necessary for retention. So you're really driving at increase in revenue, I think. Particularly as you're faced with continuing funding shortfall from the state of Colorado. So each board member, I feel like, is incumbent upon themselves to go out and explain to people why it's necessary. It's easy enough to say you should just spend less, but when you actually start looking at what that would take and what the consequences of that, largely the loss of qualified staff who are the most crucial employees in the district, then you're going to have to take it upon yourselves to go out and explain to constituents, teachers, community members, stakeholders why supporting something like a mill levy increase is crucial to the success of the school district. So.
Good. When you haven't heard yet. How do you want to be viewed by the people in the school districts?
Yeah, nobody's got to that one yet. So, I mean, I think there's a couple obvious answers, right? You want to be perceived as a dedicated public servant. And that's fine, but, I think compassion and pursuing equitable outcomes are really a stalwart of what it means to be a public servant. You have to have a community that trusts you as an individual and the board as a whole going forward. And I would like to be perceived as somebody that a constituent could approach and explain what that person believes is an issue that needs to be addressed by the board. And being approachable, having a working knowledge of things like budgetary constraints, policy goals, the strategic plan, all feed into that, so that people have a belief that you are doing the best for them that they should expect, frankly. You all have done a great job with that, so.
We've got about 5 minutes if you wanted to turn it back on us. And have questions we can answer.
Sure. Take that opportunity.
Mhm.
What do each of you perceive to be the biggest challenge that is facing the school district right now?
Planning enrollment. People are not having babies. So we, as a school district, you know, two years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we had a conversation that we were maybe getting too big and we're no longer gonna be considered rural. We're not having that problem anymore. And so we, I think the reality that, we need students in our classrooms to teach so that we can have money for salaries. And that cycle that works to create funding for our institution, that is getting really difficult to find and to supplement or to build or to fund or to have money for all of the things that we are now responsible for as a board.
The growing list of things, right?
Yeah, so I would say she's right, but I'm gonna say that, you know, I blame. Just how expensive our community has become. So many people are having fewer or no children. And the ones who are here with children are choosing to leave. Despite this being an incredibly desirable place for people to live with kids, they just can't afford it. Housing is, you know, crazy. So I'd say our biggest challenge is losing children, students, and I believe out of the you know, this is a nationwide problem, but I believe that our area would not be struggling with that if middle class people or a more average income person could afford to live here and raise a family.
Sure.
Yeah, just to pile on the declining enrollment and the impacts that has too, we continue to be a state that chronically underfunds public schools, 42nd in the nation of a relatively wealthy state. And so as we look at people who are facing growing tax bills on their homes, it's really difficult to explain to them why we still have to go for mill levy override as the state decreases their contributions, even as home prices increase. So that pie doesn't get bigger. It just, a smaller part of it comes from the state. So telling that story is difficult when we're looking at the next season that we're in right now too.
Yeah, it's almost like a negative feedback loop, right? You have an increase in cost in housing and then taxes go up, it makes it harder for people to afford to live here.
Catherine, did you have another thought on?
No, I mean, planning enrollment is the biggest challenge. I'm grateful that at this point, we've at least named it and began to plan for it. So you can ring the bell, somebody's gotta do something about it, right? So now at least we have a plan. But then you can't plan for everything that's coming at you all the time. It's which fire do you put out today, right? And that's the long-term issue is declining enrollment. Compounding on that, we have a lot of good school choice in our valley, which makes it harder when you're in a declining enrollment state because it's not just us, it's everyone.
Yeah.
And so now we're in an internal battle within our communities fighting over kids. And there are a lot of good options for parents to choose from, and then it creates division within our communities and it makes it hard. And so being that community representative and having those conversations just becomes more and more difficult because we're fighting over children. It's just, it's crazy. But, yeah, and it's not an easy fix, right? We can't policy our way out of this, we can't. Right?
Force people to move
Yeah.
there, have their children.
I mean, even if we build housing, people just aren't having as many kids.
Yeah.
Even if you address affordability, nationwide trends, families are smaller.
Yeah.
It's not, that doesn't fix it. Yeah, and it's not just us, it's schools nationwide. It's hitting us a little harder.
With a minute left, did you want to offer us any other bells?
I don't think so, y'all. I already said I appreciate what you do and what all these folks are willing to do, should you choose them. You seem like you're up to the task, but sobered by the challenges that you're facing. So I think, I'm willing to bring some energy to this and help you all and help the community if you'll have me, so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Well, Brian, thank you. Oh, man.
Well, I'm probably gonna stand up as a classroom teacher for 40 years, you know, time to the desk. Moving around from working at desk to desk with 25 to 35 kids all days.
Ross, Jonathan's framing him.
I got it.
That was
You
like,
got it, I'm good.
you've got skills.
Jump on in, tell us about yourself.
Well, another thing that I learned a long time ago, a good way to communicate with people is with story. And my students, but along with fact, but basically 40 years ago, I was teaching in Brush, Colorado, you know, where that is out on the eastern slope. And stuff like that, and one of my fellow teachers was working there, we were kind of dating and we were a lot dating. But the spring break, we were down taking a little ski trip thing. We went down to Taos and then over to Telluride and up to, we were at Wolf Creek and came up to Powderhorn, we came to Glenwood to go to Sunlight, and we skied at Sunlight, and I had made the decision, neither one of us had ever been in Glenwood before. And I made the decision that I was gonna ask her to marry me on the chairlift. Well, it was a spring snowstorm and it was snowing so hard, the snow was on my goggles so heavy I couldn't even see her, you know, over here. So we punted on that, but I punted on that, I should say, but to make a long story short, we got engaged in the pool, in the Hot Springs pool. And we were gonna go ski to Vail again, but my wife wanted to go back home. She was from the Front Range and tell her parents about this change. And so we went down there and with that, and then 10 days later, maybe we even talked about, well, this was a nice little town, we've never been here. 10 days later, Nick Massaro, who was superintendent at the time, calls me on the phone at Brush, and he said, my Chamber of Commerce just told me that we need to start a marketing, economics, and DECA program. And I just talked to the state of Colorado, and they said, you're the guy to do it. And we interviewed 10 days later. And that summer, my wife and I got married and basically made an overt decision to move to Glenwood Springs and work here and raise our kids here. And we have not been disappointed with that decision. We've now been here over 40 years, but and given that, you know, I felt fortunate that I found my work was something I felt was important and that I enjoyed. I enjoyed every day I was in the classroom. I still miss teaching. And which I don't think is in any career is necessary. I think you're fortunate in that regard. And consequently, now that I'm not teaching all the time, I have more time. And I think it's time for me to maybe give back in that regard to, after 40 years of experience, and you kind of understand that in 40 years, lots changed. Still changing as you're, you know, experiencing. And I think there's some merit to having a teacher who's been in the classroom all the time on the board. And so that's what was my motivation from that. There was a few people that mentioned it to me, but that's what they wanted. It was more my, I guess it's to feel like You know, like we discussed a little earlier, you don't stop being a teacher, I don't think, at least I can't. I know when I told my father back way back when, that I was gonna become a teacher after I've been in business for a long time. He kind of said, besides saying I was stupid, he said, well, he said, you have to understand, you gotta be good at it. He says, because it's too important not to be, so you gotta do your best to be good at it, and he said. He was a superintendent at this one time, and my mother was a one-room school teacher time ago, but. He said, good teachers are people for whom teaching isn't what they do, it's who they are, and I think that's a big deal. I think we've lost over the years, I've been involved with 40 years, it seems as if, and it could be just because I'm old guy now. That teachers were really motivated and worked hard, boom, 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 and we've lost a little of that over the dedication aspect and the idealism aspect about our kids learning and that type of thing, and I think. That's true in almost a lot of your jobs, I think, but I think that's important to try to deal with.
Well, we've got a question with what you haven't heard in the, vein of keeping everyone on their toes tonight. What specific policies, measurable goals, budget priorities, or instructional strategies would you advocate for as a board member to accelerate academic growth and improve outcomes for Latino students?
I think the biggest thing there is, before you can develop the strategies and the policies, you have to know what the problem is. It's very easy, we do this, I think, nationwide. We identify symptoms as a problem. To me, like, if the achievement gap that they want to identify with Latinos is a symptoms. That's a symptom of a problem. And until we can figure out what's causing that, what's the problem is, anything we do is just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks. And I'm not sure, believe me, I'm not privy to know why that is, right? I can only relate to what my experience was in the classroom. The only Latino students I ever had trouble with in my classroom had literacy issues. It was very difficult for them to understand the learning objectives that they learned, and obviously my word and some of the word related strategies we learning, and that's the only one I could relate to and have a firsthand knowledge of. Everything else would just be hearsay or whatever, and I think that's one of the big things the board has to do, whether I'm on it or not, is ascertain what is the problem causing that. Right, and so that's where to me, after you know what the problem is, it's relatively easy to come up with potential solutions. Some may work, some may not, but then that's the problem. At least you've got a strategy that's based on something. And so that's where I would come with that.
What do you believe are the most important indicators of student achievement and growth for a school board to monitor? How frequently should the board review this data, and what actions should the board take if student outcomes are not improving?
Well, I think, to me, outcomes have to be short-term and long-term outcomes. And sometimes schools you can get too focused on either one of them if it's possible to get over focused on one of them. But obviously you've got real short-term outcomes, any teacher in the classroom has got learning objectives that they're supposed to be following their curriculum for that particular grade level and relating to the students and developing their strategies to implement those. And that type of thing. And the assessments associated with that are going to produce your short-term outcomes, and they got to getting it or are they not? Right, that grows a little toward over time, because every year relates to the other year, right? For example, take math, right? Used to teach math a long time ago. But if you here's kids in algebra 1, okay? And in our system, we want to encourage to learn all the learning outcomes associated with algebra 1. But not many students learn 100% of them, right? Depending on that class of the school, and they 90% might be passing A, 90% might be a B, it's 70 might be C, who knows what, right? But then what people said, okay, well, they pass, but the problem with that is it creates a problem for the next year. The kid goes to algebra 2. What does the curriculum and the teacher in algebra 2 assume? they know all of algebra 1. Which they don't, which naturally inhibits their ability to function well in algebra 2 without some intervention in between or during. And that type of thing, so I think those types of things become very important and understanding that they exist. Right, you just can't assume that they know that. I mean, our universities have found that out. Most of our universities now require for them to take a math MPT, a math placement test. And they don't care as much about whether they have algebra 2, trig, calculus, or whatever, because what did they find? That there was no carryover or universality of what they learned if they took calculus or whatever. And if the kid says, okay, for example, if a kid would have trigonometry, and then so in college they put him in calculus, and if he really didn't know much about trigonometry, let alone algebra, what he's going to fail. And it's not real good marketing for the university if their kids are all flunking. So they have a vested interest in trying to find the right spot for them. I don't care what you took in high school, we gotta take this and get there, but see, I think that's a short, and somehow we're getting to a longer term outcome there. And then I even think it's important for the board to consider long-term outcomes. What percentage of them are go to some percentage, some type of post-secondary school? It doesn't have to be college. You know, it could be becoming an electrician or whatever it is. There's very few careers anymore don't need some sort of post-secondary teaching. So how many of them are going to that? How many of them are graduating that and getting the electrician? I don't think it's certificates or whatever they are, but you know, or the degree, right? And then 10 years down the road, what percentage of are employed? Even though you might say, well, it doesn't matter much, that's somewhere down the line. Well, if picking a number out of here, if only 70% of the graduates of the high school are employed 10 years from now, they were missing something here someplace that related all the way through. So I think that's how I view the outcomes.
Mabel?
Sure.
You've been in this field a long time. What do you think the most important job of the superintendent is?
Well, I think one of the most important jobs of the superintendent is to be visible in the community. You know, the superintendents that I've known that have been extraordinarily effective were visible. They were at high school games, they went to plays, and it's an enormous time thing, you know, especially here where you got 3 communities, it's magnified. Right, Rotary clubs, Chamber of Commerce's, you know, when you walk down as a superintendent, people should know you when you walk down the street. It helps them feel they have heard. Even if they never say anything bad or good, they just feel, that comfortable with the fact that if, I know her, I know if I see her, they would feel comfortable with that. I think that's very important. I think the other thing I think is, when you get down to it, you know, everything the board and the whole system is doing is to create learning in kids, increase learning in kids. I think what really helps there is for the superintendent to have credibility with their teachers. Right, so there's been schools, you know, I think there's no substitute. The instances when I've known that the teacher, the superintendent didn't have credibility, it always sometimes led around the fact that they were always been in the management and administration. They were never in a classroom day to day. And that's different, right? You know, I've run businesses before and owned them, and it's different when you're there as compared to if you're down doing it. And I think that just establishes credibility. Well, that person makes a suggestion, or maybe they make a suggestion to their principal or whatever, and that comes back, well, it adds credibility if they know that they were there and understand all the give and take of what all the problems are that get associated with being the things you have to deal with as a teacher, whether it be parental or students or whatever.
And I think we have time just for one question.
Okay.
Tammy?
I'm gonna go back to my favorite. How should the board go about finding out and knowing what the parents and taxpayers in the community want and what they're thinking?
We're, all these other gentlemen have all great things, and I think the biggest thing is people are over surveyed. Go online and get the airport survey for Aspen, right? See, and stuff like that. And we have to also remember I mean, that's obviously a valid means of acquiring, but you're gonna get a specific demographic. And that's not necessarily the only thing to do. We have to understand that most people in our valley, the parents are extraordinarily busy. They're both working. If there's only one parent involved, they're really working, right? And they don't have time to deal with all that. I mean, as a teacher at the school, you'd send out stuff, and then I'd see them on the street. I mean, after I've been here so long, you know everybody. And they say, oh, I didn't read that, I didn't know that. Well, they don't necessarily look at all the communications, they don't hop on the district website. So if you really want good information, you gotta go person to person. Business learned that if you wanna find out what your customers want, you go look at them in the face and ask them. You know, and you don't just say, what are the problems, you know, you say, what's on your mind about our schools, you know, give them a thought there. And I think doing that, I mean, there's only X number of you, but I think you can farm some of that stuff out too. You know, and do things, you could go to a Rotary meeting and get some input, you know, and then you just have to be careful that you're trying to get a variety, you know, our whole area is a composite of a bunch of demographics. Try to, okay, I hit this demographic, where I need to go to talk to these people, or have somebody on the district office go talk to them, etc. I just, you're gonna learn more that's accurate and isn't crisis based if you go to them and talk to them face to face.
Well, thanks so much. Did you have any final thoughts you wanted to offer us? I don't know that we have time for questions. We've got to get through another couple hours of an agenda coming up this evening, but if you wanted to offer us a final closing thought as well.
Well, I was just gonna ask everybody what you guys talked about with declining enrollment, which is an enormous problem, right? And to some degree, the fact that we're 42nd or whatever it is in the country and funding doesn't matter because you and I can't do anything about it. That's a legislative issue. Now, we can lobby like heck, but they're getting lobbied by all sorts of stuff like that. And so I didn't know whether you felt, and you touched on it a little bit, I mean, obviously there's a declining birth rate thing, and we don't have a whole lot of input on that either, right? Yeah, but you touched on the fact that, you know, there's a number of people that are homeschooled and are going to private schools and Christian schools. And I don't know if they have access to numbers in that, or even, I don't know how they would obtain them even, but what, if you had a feel for why they seem to be attracted there instead of the school district?
I can't speak to why they personally are attracted there, but I think as a parent, what you feel is, especially in this day and age, is information overload. And you feel like you wanna do what's right for your kid and you're looking at peers moving and doing what's right. And there's a lot of that, the grass might be greener. Am I doing what's best? Am I doing what's best? And I think back to when I was a kid and the choice was Catholic school or public school, right? You had two choices. There was one private school and one public school, and your parents made a choice. You live in the town of Carbondale, you've got 4 elementary schools you can choose from.
Sure.
Right? Like, there's a lot of options for a very small population. And I think there's a lot of pressure on parents to do the right thing. And I don't know what their personal decisions are. I think that there is constant input, which makes it hard.
Yeah. I just didn't know if Eddie ever got feedback from saying, well, I went here because.
Not
Or not.
often. I mean, I think we're
No.
starting to do better about collecting that data, but historically we haven't.
But they don't necessarily volunteer.
No.
much.
It requires that one-on-one personal
good.
connection with school
Yeah.
peers when parents pull their kids.
Well, thanks so
Cause
much.
again, it's
for-
hard to solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
If you don't know what's causing it,
Yeah.
you know, them going there again is the symptom. What's the problem that moved them there, which is.
Yeah.
Would be nice. But
Well, thanks so much for your
Sure.
time this evening, unless other board wanted to respond to that question specifically. All right, so this does conclude the interview portion of the evening. The board's gonna step out and grab some dinner, but you are welcome to stay. We're gonna have a brief deliberation. It's all public session, this is a work session. And you're also welcome to sit in for a public meeting, which starts around 6:30. Either way, thank you so much for the time you took tonight. Again, it's so encouraging to have this slate of candidates in front of us to share your thoughts and your commitment to our district. And even if we don't find room for you on the board this time, please find another way to be heard and participate. There's a lot of different avenues. And our community needs this. Community needs you engaged in schools, however that feels right for you. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Join the doc.
Yes, in a
Wait,
second.
yeah.
Alright, so.
And we're gonna take a little bit here.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
So no, short answer, I don't have a plan for community feedback, but if there's a consensus here that we need to make time for it, I'm persuadable.
May want to for the live stream say we're starting the deliberation.
Welcome back, folks. This is the dinner edition of our work session this evening. Wrapping up some of the comments and procedures around the appointment process. So Catherine, what do you think? Is it worth doing around there?
No, I mean, I don't. I don't think we have to, I should know that's something that the board values, I expect there will be news coverage of this, I expect we'll get some input. I think if any of us get input, I would appreciate us sharing it with the rest of the board, we're all on the same page. As we move into decision making.
Agreed.
I mean, I just think it'd be important to wherever we're putting this out on the district. Or in the district, just to make sure that they know that we've done the interviews and that they can see them and anybody wanting to look at them and weigh in. I mean, I guess that's legit, right? That's what I want to know. It's good to have public input. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a plan for it right now, just based on where our board was last time with this. I know we kind of had to scrounge up time for the interviews themselves, so.
I'm really comfortable calling references and then just like you said, if somebody offers up some info or something, that we would share it.
Well, then I think we should find a time for the special session so we can let the applicants know when a decision will be made. It seems like they're still waiting outside.
I spoke with all of them on the next steps, so they know that they'll get an email when a special session is scheduled, and that will be when we make our decision.
And today is the.
Seventh. So.
Great calendars.
That's my one hope today, for sure, that we look at calendars.
We're trying to do it before when?
We need to do it before the 10th, but we cannot do it more than 10 days before the 10th, because there's a requirement that once we make the appointment, that individual is sworn in no less than 10 days. Or it's a. Yeah.
So maybe we look at start beginning of next week. First week of June, does that look right?
June 2nd is good for me.
I am not available either one of those nights.
Okay.
4 days. But
June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
third, I'm open, just first and
Okay.
second.
You can't do the 3rd? No, it's last day of school.
Fourth is doable for me. Thursday.
I could do the 4th during the day, not the evening.
Is there any way we could do it like right after drop off, like in the morning?
There's no school.
Oh, yeah.
School's over.
We just said that. Okay.
Where are you dropping them off?
Somewhere, my husband's on ship. He'll be coming with me. I mean, I can make Thursday or Friday work.
Can we do this virtually?
Yes, right, that is the fun, yep, it'll be virtual. It'll be noticed, and then all of the applicants will get an email with the date and the link to watch. Or attend probably on the Zoom. But they won't be on camera or present us or anything else.
So we're doing it the 4th or the 5th? Or what?
Jasmine, do either of those work for you?
I can do the 4th after, after 9, 10.
Okay.
And then I can do the 5th in the morning before 2.
Yeah, fourth works for me, only blackout is 12 to 1.
Probably 4th at like 9 AM.
Yeah, let's do it in the morning, because I'm just gonna let my kids watch TV.
They probably
Can
won't
we
be
do
there.
10?
That's fine.
Sorry, I'm dropping Dylan off for pre-collegiate, so.
Yeah, 10 works.
The 10 AM Thursday, May 4th,
June.
June 4th, sorry.
And how long are we thinking that'll take?
Well, that's gonna be up to us. The goal is that if there's final deliberation, we have to reach a consensus. So the request I heard from the board is that we wanted to do interviews and then kind of sit with the information, call references. So maybe on the 10th, Tammy, if you are, we can divide up the reference calling as well, if that feels like a lot, so you and I can touch base.
It just depends on how many people answer. I can get a hold of people.
We can maybe divide that up and stay in touch, but we'll need to make sure that the board sees that, and so it'll kind of have to happen in the next few days so that we can have everyone have that in front of them to consider before the 4th. So it begin with just basically where are we at? We share a top candidate. We see how close we are to consensus. We share our thoughts and views. It all has to be public deliberations. I think that'll be good and healthy for us to kind of examine it. But yeah, we'll just need to make sure we get the reference summary to everyone before that.
Okay.
By at least 2 days.
Okay.
Hopefully we get return calls. Anna, does that scheduling work?
Or trip?
Right, so we deliberate on the 4th and then
Deliberate and decide, right?
Yep, deliberate and then
decide,
we'll take a motion and then vote on the motion to appoint.
and then we immediately let the candidates know.
Yep, and we'll need to have, I don't know, Anna, do you wanna do press on the appointment or press on the swearing in?
That's a great question. Maybe a appointment, so that after that meeting.
Well, we need to get somebody to approve, to agree. To make
That's
the
right.
appointment, and they have to,
That's right, then they have to accept.
Yeah. Unless we are conscripted now, which, I don't know, that sounds good too.
What does that mean?
They join up no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
How does that work then? We achieve, you all achieve consensus on the 4th.
We make a
I have to
motion
call somebody.
for an appointment, yep,
Okay,
and then you and I should call
got it. Okay.
that person.
Uh-huh.
And they, of course, be welcome to be watching on the live stream.
All right, and then the public finds out on the 10th.
Huh. They could tune in.
Oh, yeah.
And for that reason, I think it's worth when somebody accepts, when we send something.
Yeah, that sounds good to me too.
When the expectation is that we're swearing them in at the top of the meeting on the 10th and we're engaged in the.
No, that will be swearing in after most of the action items on the 10th. So it'll be one of the last things that we do is swear in the new candidate, have board elections, and then wrap the meeting with appreciations in the same way that we usually do.
Okay.
So in that way, it'll follow the same order of operations that we have during an election cycle. I mean, I'm open to that. If there's concerns there, please voice them. That's what this time is.
When is the board retreat?
That same day.
Right, you know, it's just the on camera part of it.
Yep.
So based on the interest of a more robust board retreat and a culture building decision. The proposal you guys saw from Janice that you looked over, and this is again coming down the pipe. We need to. I would prefer that we do that with a full board. And that it'll be beginning of the year. The interest in providing feedback to the superintendent and having communications around our board communication norms. Is something that I can hear happening and needs to happen prior to the public meeting and the swearing in. So the order of operations will be going as a work session with board norms and superintendent feedback, public session, then swearing in. That's what I've heard from board members, but again, this time is to discuss it if somebody else
That's
wants.
all on the 10th?
Yep.
Okay, and that's not with Janice?
No.
Not with Janice,
No.
okay.
Based on what I saw from her proposal, I do think it would be something worthwhile to do with the newly formed board. Not just with the 4 of us and then add one.
So we have to pick a date for the board retreat.
Yep, and that would be something that we will be doing. At the work session where we talk about, after the person is sworn in. We have to find that calendar day that overlaps in August for all of us, so Anna's getting together a quick doodle poll for that purpose, so that'll be ready on the 10th after the person joins the board.
Okay.
But again, if others have seen it differently, this is our time to discuss, figure out what works best, what's the flow that helps get our values out, and if I missed something in the world, I'm more than happy to address it.
When are we getting our values out?
Right now. Oh, about the final day, where we have a work session. Where we talk about board communication norms and superintendent feedback, kind of mid-year check-in as requested. Public session, vote on the budget, take actions. Final swearing in of the new candidate, board elections. Wrap the meeting, decide on a date for the full retreat in August.
What time are we starting that day?
Great question.
Okay.
Are people available at 4 on the 10th? We start the work session a little earlier.
I just kept that day free because I thought, I knew that was originally the day of the retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's in the calendar.
Just so you know, it's not really a retreat. They call it a retreat, but it's just a all-day work session.
Another retreat.
It's not all day.
I was so excited to find out we were doing a board retreat. And then I was like, are we going to the spa? No.
So we could go as early as 3, if you guys want to make it feel like a longer work session retreat, to have those kind of structured conversations.
I guess what is the goal of the work session? Communication norms?
Yeah, so revisiting board norms and communication conversations, and then there was a request for mid-year check-in with the superintendent to offer feedback and conversation.
So is this an executive session?
So here's the thing, guys, I've heard a few things from a few people, and I think what I'd love to get is. I don't wanna do a one-off conversation with the superintendent where we're all just kind of throwing ideas. I believe it's important for us to speak as a unified voice to the superintendent in our feedback. So once tonight was over, my next step was to come up with a very simple questionnaire that we can send around and provide our feedback on. And I'll consolidate that before the 10th and obviously get everyone's eyes on it well in advance of that, and that's for the superintendent feedback. And in my mind right now, from what I've heard from everyone, it should be as simple as. What is it that we keep doing? What does she keep doing? Dr. Cole, you're in the room, so it gets awkward, but feel free to hang out. And what is it that we need to see changing? So it's gonna be less formal than the superintendent evaluation process, less structured, because we have so many questions and it just is a huge time lift to be able to do that. But I do think it's important to gather the voices and kind of have a united perspective on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't think we can have this conversation right now. This has not been noticed.
Okay.
This has not been, we need that. We can't do this as a group right now. It's not, isn't in our work session agenda.
I'm just trying to get the time. Yeah, I'm trying
Yeah,
to like.
time, yes.
The
Go back
time,
to
so
time.
that it would only be a few questions that we share, I'm showing you how much time it would be, we don't need to go into the content of that. So I feel like if we started at 3, there would be plenty of time to get most of that covered.
3 to 5:30 or 3 to 6 work session, is that what you're proposing?
But it'll all be public work session.
Okay, that's the plan right now.
6:15 meeting.
Mhm.
Okay.
3 to 6, 6:15 board meeting
Correct.
on the 10th, okay.
Anna, do you think that 6:15 is enough time for the agenda that we have there? I saw Christy. We got a lot of stuff, so. Let me just check that with you.
He was charging.
We have.
I have all those items in the agenda, if you wanna review that. It's draft, but
We're gonna have Ben's. I know you.
Actually, sorry, hold on, let's you and I go over this tomorrow. We can decide on the start time of the meeting, but let's begin the work session at 3 unless others have scheduled conflicts with that on the 10th.
Can I just ask, so we're doing 3 because we want more time?
That was what I heard, yeah. I hope that feels right, and please weigh in if it doesn't.
I don't know, I still feel very confused, but I trust that I'll be able to. Yeah.
Work session would include conversation about communication norms. Superintendent feedback for mid-year progress report. And then we have a robust board meeting. Does that sound right?
That's what I heard too, and you had superintendent goals on that day for work session, so that
Yeah,
would,
so that would be part of
that
that,
would be
like,
a part of the discussion.
progress
Why
report.
don't we block off 3 o'clock and then we. If after you guys talk tomorrow, you discover it's less time at work session, we can just move up the start time of the board meeting since it's such a full meeting.
That's what I'm looking for.
To like 5.
Yep.
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay.
Well, thanks for getting us through tonight, guys. That was the timeliest priority, so well done.
Alright,
So are we concluding at this point or no? Yes. Okay,
Yes.
so everybody online, we will be restarting the regular board meeting in a few minutes. Thanks for joining.